recording it. All right, I got to do that before I share the screen. So we're beginning now. Let me just start by going to the website. Someplace I have it. There we go. Let's close that down. So when you log in to Canvas, you should be able to find a link with a virus, and that'll be our microbiology class. And it seems like it's taking a long time to log in, probably because this is the second day of the term, so a lot of people are using it. So you should be able to get into the class, and when you look at the Canvas web page, it's both the lecture and the lab. There will be separated mostly in weeks. In the very top, I've got some general course information, like there's a note you should read. There's my syllabus for technical help, getting technical help, like if your computer isn't working with Canvas or something like that. Of course, if it doesn't, I don't know how you could click on that, but modifying your Canvas website. You should modify your Canvas website, which I think is the default setting, so that when I make an announcement where I send you an email, you're going to get a notification of that. This is a link going to my YouTube website. A note about Zoom and the Zoom meeting invites, and obviously you're in the class, so you got my email. This is the message I emailed you. Some biosafety information, which really isn't terribly important for us because none of you will be in the lab actually working with microorganisms. The lockdown browser requirement for the multiple choice quizzes, you have to take it using Lockdown Browser. What this software does is it locks down your browser, and you have to be in the browser taking the quiz, and you're locked down until you submit the quiz. So you can't use other parts of your computer, except maybe a calculator, to when you're taking the quiz. Any question about that? I do require you for the multiple choice questions to use the Lockdown Browser. And this is a program that you need to download. It's click on it and you can get it. I suggest you do that before taking the quiz because a few times, like about every other term, there's one student who has trouble getting the Lockdown Browser running on their system, in which case you should contact the, what do they call it, the computer help desk. I don't know what they call it here. For getting it to work, they're very good at getting this to work on your system. Most students don't have any trouble with it, and I believe last term I didn't have any students who had any trouble. But about every other term, there's one student who has trouble getting it to run on their system. If you have an older computer, you probably want to shut down all your other programs on that computer while you're taking the quiz, because you have to have the quiz open and the Lockdown Browser open. And if your system is slow, you're going to be losing time on the multiple choice quizzes, which they're a timed quiz. Okay? So what you want to do is shut down all the software you don't need and only have what you absolutely need running on your system. Of course, if you have a very fast computer, that won't be a problem. Hopefully all of you got the textbook. If you don't have the textbook, the first 3 chapters of the textbook are on this link here, and then the chapter summaries are also on this link. and hopefully that'll give you enough time to get the textbook. I sent out a note that you should notice on the schedule you have to take the plagiarism tutorial and the plagiarism quiz by the end of this week. And this quiz is worth 20 points. You must score 100% on this quiz or you will get a 0 on the infectious disease project, and that is worth 100 points. However, you can take this quiz multiple times. It's something like between 5 and 7 times. Okay, and then there's a link that'll help you with the Plagie quiz and the Avoid Plagiarism tutorial. Just a class guide on how to use APA citation styles. And then you scroll down further. Week 1 lecture, which we're in. An overview and the objectives for Chapter 1, a study guide. You don't actually see that one. There is a worksheet which is due, which covers Lecture 1, which is due Saturday, April 10th. It's only worth 2 points. And then 2 extra credit assignments. I'm just going to point them out. Extra credit picture and an extra credit study sheet. If you're interested in extra credit, click these links and find out. I think this is worth, the extra credit picture is worth 3 or 4 points. Let me see what it says here. 3 points. And I believe the extra credit study sheet, that's where you send me your schedule, what the heck you're doing in your life, and what your, I don't know, schedule, your eating schedule, your sleeping schedule is. That's on the first tab. And then the second tab will be week 1, your study schedule for microbiology, when you're planning on studying. And then the tab 2 will be for week 2 if it's different than week 1, etc. And you can create more tabs if you need to. And this extra credit study sheet is worth 6 points. This one I think is due on Saturday. Let me see if I can find that. So you need to get that one in early. Yep. This Saturday, the 10th. April 10th. The picture, I think I'm a little more generous. You get 2 or 3 weeks to get it in for that extra credit assignment. All right, any question about anything? A reminder, the plagiarism quiz for this week. And then we go on to week 1 lab. I'll talk about that when we're getting into the lab. And then week 2 lecture. I think this term I've got all of the lecture up there. I have the lab shut down later on, but I think all of the lectures are up. I hope that doesn't overload you. Normally I shut down the later lecture weeks, like everything after week 5, but with the lecture it's kind of difficult because when I turn it on, it turns on all the ones I have off, and then I have to go in there and turn them off. And I decided this term I'm just going to give you all the lectures, and hopefully you won't be overloaded. If you are, just let me know and I will improve it for next term. Any questions about the website? If not, let's move on to the syllabus.
Hello?
I heard somebody talking. Tara, was that you? Let me see if I can turn up my volume because I'm not hearing you. Okay, Tara, could you try it again?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, now I can hear you.
Oh, okay. I was wondering how the format for the worksheet works because I was looking at it and it kind of confused me.
The worksheet? Which one? Lecture?
Oh, yeah, lecture.
Okay. What you do in the first worksheet is you answer 1 or 2 questions. I'll have to look that up. I don't remember. So click on that link, and then all you do is answer one of the questions in the order they're presented. So if you're the first one answering, then you take question 1 and you click on the reply. Somebody's already done that, so you'd have to take question 3. And then you put in your answer. And that way, there's 20 questions. You will only be answering in this worksheet only one question. And then you look at the other students' answers for question 1. The naming of classifying organisms was begun in the 18th century by who? And it's Carolus Linnaeus. That answer is correct. And then this student will get 2 points. And then you got the answer for number 1. And then you will give the answer if you're giving the third one for number 3. And so that way you're dividing up the work with your classmates. Does that explain it?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. All right, let me go back to where I was on the syllabus. So we will be meeting at our normal times, but if you can't make it, there will be a recording, as long as I remember to make the recording. That's why I'm asking you students, if you see I'm not recording, please let me know. The trouble is, when I'm sharing my screen, I have to look at this little button there, and if it's got a red dot in it, it means I'm recording. And if there's no red dot in it, it means I'm not recording. And that's not a very easy thing for me to see and notice. Of course, you notice I have glasses on, so my vision isn't the best. So if you see that I'm not recording, please let me know. We'll just word it that way. If you need to get a hold of me, the best thing to do actually is to put in the class email, which you simply come here and then hit the inbox and send me an email. I will check the inbox at least every other day. I will probably check it every day, Monday through Friday. On the weekends, on Saturday and Sunday, I probably won't check it every day. But most days in the class email, I will check it most days, every day, and certainly every other day. In my Clark email, I get lots of email from the college, and most of it is stuff I don't want to even know, let alone read. So I don't check it every day because I get so much email. So if you send it to the Clark email site, realize that I will get to it, but I won't get to it right away, and it might get buried in the avalanche of email that I get to that one. All right, the office hours are by arrangement online. We can meet by Zoom. Just email me if you'd like to do that. Another good time to do it is after the lab or during the lab, if you don't mind it being a public discussion so somebody could hear it. It could be during the lab. But if you want it to be private, then all we need to do is wait until the lab ends, and then we can have it after all the other students have logged off. And if you want to do it at another time, just email me and we can set up a time. All right, I'm going to let you read the textbook and the materials and the other resources. You should realize that the Canvas website has most of the other resources, exception being maybe the optional text. I think at least some of the optional texts you can get from the library. They are open and they are serving students. I don't know how it exactly works. I assume you have to contact a librarian to use the library, but at least with the what do they call that? The course reserve, that they still have that at the library. And you don't have to go in to access it. I should make a note in, I've got this later, but since I thought of it, there is online tutoring, and I've got a link to it. There is personal tutoring too, but I'm not sure where that is. There it is. Support students for students. And I don't know why that's so truncated. That should be out wider. Tutoring services. Contact the tutoring center. And this link is the general link for tutoring. And this is for their tutoring services. Okay. Now that was supposed to be one that you could access, but it looks like that link isn't working directly from this page. You'll have to copy and paste it into your browser. All right, let's go back to where we were. Course description, I'll let you read about that. The course outcomes, you can read about that. Course policies and suggestions. If you're ill, please contact me and I'll help you keep on track. Contact me prior to any due dates to make arrangements for turning in the work late. You should read the preparation for class. You really do need to read the material. You really should read the labs before you begin the lab. The lectures, you can read that after I lesson on them, but you should read them before the quizzes and before the final. Attendance and participation. I'm not really going to take attendance because it's an online class. Please note that the quizzes are also online. There are two types of quizzes. I should have showed you that when we were in the web page. There will be a multiple choice quiz, and that quiz you have to use the lockdown browser and it will be timed. You have a little more than a minute for each question, so that if you did look up an answer, you would have enough time to look up the answers to maybe one or two questions out of your textbook. Okay? But you won't have enough time to look up all of them. So don't look up the answers. And if you do look up the answers, you may run out of time, in which case you won't be able to get the last question done. There's also a quiz which is essay answers, and that one is not timed. You have to take it on the day that the quizzes are scheduled, and those are all scheduled on Wednesday. If students have an objection for taking the quizzes on Wednesday, please let me know. But the previous students didn't want it on Tuesday and Thursday because we're lecturing on those days. And that's fine. And so Wednesdays generally worked well. So I've just set it to Wednesday, and I'll leave it that way unless a majority of the students want another day. What else? So for the quizzes, you can start them anytime from midnight before the day. I don't know if midnight's the start of the day or the end of the day. I don't remember that. So we'll say like 11:59 p.m. The night before. You can start any of the quizzes, meaning for that week. And then for the essay quiz, it must be finished by 11:59 p.m. that next day. So you have one day to take the quiz, the essay quiz. Now you can take the multiple choice quiz anytime within that day. So 11:59 p.m. Tuesday, and then it must be finished by 11:59 p.m. Wednesday. So generally Wednesday you take the quiz. But the multiple choice quiz is timed, and once you begin, you have a little more than a minute for each question. And then after that point, the quiz will end, and if you didn't finish it, then you didn't finish it, because it's a time quiz. Make sure you get the quiz started before 11:59 p.m. on Wednesday, because the quiz will end, both of them, at 11:59 p.m. on Wednesday, even if you started it like at 11:58 p.m., meaning you don't have 15 minutes if you start at 11:58 p.m. Any question about that? Read the student responsibilities for what I hold you accountable for. You should be familiar with what the assignments are, how to do them, and when to turn them in. And you will be notified on the Canvas webpage, everything that has a due date. It will say it on Canvas, as well as it's in the calendar, your calendar. If something is wrong on a due date, please let me know before the fact. Like last term on the final, a student told me a day beforehand that the date of the final was for last term. It never rolled over into this term, which it was supposed to. And I got it changed, but then Canvas changed my changes because I put in, the start date, the due date, and must be done by date, whatever they call that, the end date. And for some reason, Canvas took all of them and made them all the same, which the start date should never be the same as the due date. And if I ever try to make that, it'll object, saying you can't have the start date the same time as the due date. But Canvas did it, and then students tried to get into the exam, and the start date was the same thing as the end date and the due date, so they couldn't get into the exam. And they didn't notice that until the day of the exam, so obviously I didn't get it until several hours later, because I didn't check the emails. And it just created a problem, and I solved it. I gave them an extra day to take the final. But the point is, if there's a problem, try and let me know in advance, then I can change it. And last term, I don't know what it was, but Canvas was doing all sorts of strange things. I mentioned that it changed the start date and the end date and the due date and made them all the same. And it did two other things. I don't remember what they were, but where it was just changing things. And it was kind of like changing things randomly. And I don't know what happened, if that was only happening to me or if it was something else. I did get an email saying that Canvas was having problems and they were working on it, but I thought it was a problem with the logging in to Canvas, and it was more than that. Canvas was acting erratically last term, and I hope this term it won't be doing that. I have some instructor responsibilities. I will try to respond to all emails sent to the course website, meaning our Canvas website, within 48 hours. I will also try to have all assignments graded within a week of the due date. Please note that big assignments may take additional time, like the infectious disease project and your unknown project. Those take me, probably at least a half an hour for each student to grade it, in which case I may not get them done within a week of the due date. And I'll work on them, but obviously on those really big assignments, I never get the entire class done in one day. Even if I spend the entire day grading, I never get the class done in one day. It's at least 2 days. And sometimes it's I do a little bit each day, and it takes me a week to get them done. All right, read about the course withdrawal. Hopefully that'll never happen, but if you need to withdraw, please do so. And if you're thinking about withdrawing, you should withdraw during the first week. I think it's Saturday, by Saturday, maybe you make sure you do it by Friday, and then you'll get 100% refund for this course. If you don't withdraw in the first week, then you will have to pay for the class. And if you don't withdraw and you simply stop coming, I will be required to give you an F. And I don't like giving Fs, so please withdraw. Late assignments, I do accept late work, but if it's late by 1 day, you're going to get a 25% penalty. And after that, if it's late, it's 50% penalty. And I may not give you the credit if I have put up the correct answers. Okay? So on some assignments, mostly lab assignments, I may post the answers, and if I post the answers and you turn it in late, I will not accept it. There's very few assignments that I post the answers, but if I do post the answers, I will not accept late assignment after I post the answers. If you turn it in late before I post the answers, I will accept it. I also do not accept late work during finals week. Any question about any of that? All right, so get your work in on time and you won't get a penalty. All right, you should learn about student conduct, what your rights are and what's acceptable and unacceptable behavior. It's in the Student Code of Conduct at this link here. And the only trouble I've ever had from students is plagiarism. Well, I suppose copying other students' work, which that is plagiarism. But if I see that happening, then you both will get 0 points on that assignment. Okay? If you are working with a study buddy, and I actually encourage you to do that, and you like your study buddy's answer, you cannot simply put down what your study buddy said. You must, if you want to use his exact words, put it in quotes and say who you got it from. Then it's not plagiarizing. And it's even better to write it in your own words. Okay? And then that's not plagiarizing either. There is one exception where I do allow plagiarism, and that is if I ask for a term, you can get the answer directly from the textbook. The term is from, what the heck is our name of our book? Whatever the authors are. You don't have to put quote, this is the definition of the term, quote, and then whoever our textbook author is. It's not Otto-Cirk. What the heck is our textbook author? Drawing a blank here. I'll have to look it up. Any questions about plagiarism? All right. You can read about etiquette for Zoom, read about the suggested study methods. This class will be very busy. Okay, you should read about this. I'm just going to go over the highlights. You should expect to spend about 7 hours of 7 hours outside of the class working on the class. And that will be doing the reading, doing the homework assignments, doing the lab. And that's not counting the 7 hours you'll be spending in class per week. So you're going to be spending about 14 hours of class on this class. And if you don't have the time for that, and that's on average for a person, if you don't have the time to spend 14 hours outside of class on this class, then maybe you should take this class at another quarter when you have the time to spend for this class, because this class is very busy. It looks like somebody was sending me a message I sent out. I don't check the chat box. So if you want to send a chat box and you don't want to send it out loud, you got to email it to me.
It was me. Can I ask you now?
Yeah.
I was curious as to if I saw there's 2 practice quizzes in week 2. Are those to help us navigate Canvas, or are those going to be actual like helpful questions? Because I just saw they're with 0 points, so I was curious as to
Yeah, all extra credit assignments. See, this is 0 points. I've got to put it as 0 points. Otherwise, it's not extra credit. If I put it as 1 point, then that will add to your total points in this class. So I put it as 0 points, and then I'll give you 3 out of 0, and then you got the extra credit. So even though it says 0 points, that doesn't mean that's how much you're going to get out of it.
Will you scroll down a little bit on your computer?
I'm just explaining that. It depends on the quiz. Is it this one? Practice quiz 00A. This is a practice quiz, and there's 2 of them. I think one of the quizzes is worth 1 point, and the other one is worth 2 extra credit points. That didn't open another window. Why didn't that open another window? All right, I'm going to have to go to that quiz directly. I couldn't open another window. The 2 practice quizzes are because I've got 2 types of quizzes. One is a multiple choice quiz. On this quiz, each question is worth 0.1 point. And it's not telling me. I allow you to have 2 attempts, and it's not telling me how many quizzes there are. I have to edit it. I really don't want to spend the time doing this. This is really slow today, people. There's 15 questions on this one.
Okay.
All right. And
thank you for explaining that.
Yeah. So those practice quizzes, there are extra credit points. I believe, like I said, one is worth 1 point, and the other is worth 2 points. There are some, I don't know if you want to call them quizzes, but oh gosh, I'm still not there. There are some links to quizzes on the metric system later on, and those I'm not giving you right here. Optional metric quizzes, I'm not giving you extra credit on these. These are just helping you with the metric system. But these questions on practice quiz 00, oops, that's not it, and 00B and 00A, these are practicing, giving you practice on a quiz. They will be helpful in that sense. None of those questions will be on your quizzes, if that's what you were asking. Okay?
Okay.
I've also got another question for you.
Go ahead.
So I was a little bit confused about the letter you sent us and the syllabus, because it says that it's required in the syllabus to be attending these meetings, or is it optional?
I put in the letter that it's highly recommended you come to class so you can ask questions, but it is not required. Okay? All right, you do need to see it on YouTube, assuming I make it, and hopefully if I'm not recording it, the students will tell me that I'm not recording it and I will get it recorded. but occasionally mistakes do get made, and it doesn't get put up on YouTube. But I'm intending to put up the lessons on YouTube. There's a bunch of
Just in case the
suggestions
lag
for
is
helping you
just wrong.
study. Okay. And let's move on. The grading, I need to talk about that. There is a plagiarism quiz. It's due this Saturday. It's worth 20 points. There will be 5 quizzes that are worth 75 points each, and that is there will be a quiz 1A and a quiz 1B, because I've got 2 types of quizzes, and the essay questions have to be different from the multiple choice questions. That's why there's 2 quizzes 1A. And when I'm counting 5 quizzes, I'm counting quiz 1. There were 75 points, but the lowest quiz that you get will be dropped, and so only 4 of them count, and they're worth 300 points. For the multiple choice quizzes, questions, you have to use Respondus Lockdown Browser. It is highly recommended that you try to take the extra credit quiz 00, I think it's quiz 00B, but it might be quiz 00A. And you have to use the Lockdown Browser to take that quiz. And if you get it to work, then you know everything is fine with the Lockdown Browser. So get that started before the due date, because you have to get it on your system and running. And generally, most people just download it and it runs perfectly. But like I said, occasionally a student runs into a problem. And unless you're good at solving problems on your computer, you're going to want to contact the computer help desk, and they'll help you get it up and running. So far, I've never had a student who never got Lockdown Browser to not work on their system, although some students have had to contact the computer help desk for help to get it running on their system. Generally, every lecture and every lab will have a worksheet. The lab worksheets are worth a total of 50 points. The lecture worksheets are worth a total of 25 points. Generally, those worksheets are due on Saturday, the week of the lecture or the week of the lab. There will also be a unknown bacteria project, and you'll turn in a research paper on your unknown, and that'll be worth 75 points. There's an infectious disease research project. You need to do research on an infectious disease, write it up, and then turn that in. That's worth 100 points. The final is cumulative, and it'll be worth 150 points. I'll talk more about it as we get closer to the final. And so the total breakdown of points: plagiarism quiz, 20 points. Quizzes, there's 5, but you drop the lowest one, so only 4 count, 75 points for 30 points. The lab assignments, there's various numbers of them, 1 for each lab. They're worth 50 points, so I think I can actually change that to 10 now, 5 points each. Nope, the first lab, there's 2 of them for the first lab, so that one's 5. 2.5 and 2.5, but all the others are 5. Identification of the unknown, 1 at 175 points. I don't know what that is there. I gotta get rid of that. 1 at 75 points. Infectious disease project, 1 at 100 points. Lecture worksheets, various, they'll be worth 25 points. Most of them are worth 2 points, and then at the very end, it won't come up to 25 points, so I'll give you the total score and give you a correction to bring it up to 25 points. And then the final worth 150 points, and that means that this class is worth a total of 720 points. Your grade will be your percentage out of that 720 points. If you get 720 out of 720, you get 100%, and that will be an A. Anything over 92% is an A. over 90% is an A minus, over 88% is a B plus, etc. Any question about that? All right, so that's the grading scale. There are 20 points of extra credit in this course. The glass is generally not curved. I'll let you read about question review and written corrections. This is for students who don't like a quiz question and you want to challenge it. You read this up if you want to challenge it. Microscope use in the lab and the virtual labs. We don't use microscopes, so it's not terribly important, but you do need to know how to use the microscope, how to take care of the microscope, and how to put the microscope away. So we'd expect you to know that, even though you're not really going to be using a microscope. All right, read about the student support services for students. I did talk about the tutoring, but there's counseling and the health center, the disability support, the library, campus computer center. They do have computer centers, and the students can use them even now, even though the campus, I don't think it's open this term, except for special classes. But the computer centers are working. I don't know how they work, but you can contact them and find out if you want to use them. And then let me make out any student who's having difficulty affording groceries or lacks a safe and stable place to live, you should read this information and contact the dean, Kath Busha. Okay. Read about the non-discrimination policy, school emergency procedures, safety information, words of advice and consent, lab and safety rules. You do need to know these, but I'm not going to go over them, and I'll go over them briefly in the lab. And then scroll down to the bottom of the syllabus. You'll have the tentative course schedule. It is subject to change. This week we're going to be going over technology, the syllabus, which I've essentially done now, tips for success, and then chapter 1, and we'll start chapter 10 in this lesson. We probably won't get to it today, but we'll start chapter 1. And then on the right hand is the lab. If you'll notice, we're doing 2 labs today. Lab 00 on lab safety and lab 01. And that'll be at 6:30 today. Let me mention that I am the only microbiology instructor, that I will be there in the lab at 6:30 to answer your questions. Most of the microbiology labs, they have the lab. Simply, you do it online, and I suppose if you have a question, you send an email. But I'll be there to answer your questions. All right, any question about the syllabus and the schedule? If not, let's move on to chapter 1. Okay, chapter 1, the microbial world in you, and in this lesson we'll cover a little bit of chapter 10. If you have the current version of the textbook, it's pages 272 to 281 of chapter 10, covering the classification of microorganisms. Usually what I do in these lessons is I will have a first slide giving you the major goals of the lesson. This is not the only goals. You need to read the objectives if you want to learn all of the goals. But the major goals I give you in the first slide, and then a rough outline of about what we'll be covering. So you need to know the terms of this chapter. What's a microbe, microorganism, a germ, a pathogenic organism, a parasitic organism, what's microbiota, and infectious disease, emerging infectious disease, pasteurization, and Koch's postulates. We'll talk about the brief history of microbiology and talk about the importance of microbes. And I should probably have this one first because we're actually going to talk about this first. Any questions about what we're doing? All right, let's move on. The importance of microbes in the world. Here we're looking at the nitrogen cycle, and nitrogen starts in the atmosphere as nitrogen gas. And nitrogen gas can be fixed by bacteria and archaea into organic compounds. And once these organic compounds are made, various things can happen to them. Usually the organism keeps them until the organism dies, and then most of it will be decomposed by bacteria or archaebacteria called archaea, or by fungi, and then will decompose into ammonia and ammonium. But some of the organic compounds can go into the soil and be directly taken up by plants. Very little of the organic compounds do that. And then some of them can decompose directly into nitrates. The majority don't do that. The majority come this way. The ammonia can be taken up by the soil by plants, but plants don't like ammonia and ammonium. These two happen whenever there's water around. Ammonia can turn into ammonium, and then when the water goes away, the ammonium can turn into ammonia. So we'll just put those together. Plants can take up both of them, but they don't like ammonia. And you get too much ammonia on the plant, it'll actually kill the plant. And then the ammonia or the ammonium can be nitrified by bacteria and archaea into nitrite, and can be nitrified further by bacteria into nitrate. And green plants love nitrate. If you look on your plant fertilizer, it'll generally have a nitrate in it. And green plants can take that up, and that's the form of nitrogen that green plants utilize and love. And then they'll take these nitrogen and make it into an organic compound, which most of it will once again decompose by bacteria, archaea, and fungi into ammonium and ammonia. Okay? And then the nitrates can be denitrified by bacteria and archaea and converted into nitrogen, making a cycle of nitrogen moving around in the planet. And that's the nitrogen cycle. And how important are microbes in our lives and with the planet? Well, when we look at the nitrogen cycle, every part of the nitrogen cycle that has a red arrow, that step is done by microbes. And the only reason why the nitrogen moves from one part in the ecosystem to another part is by a microbe. Okay? And if you notice, most of the nitrogen cycle, there's this step and this step with the soil where the ammonium just moves around in the soil to the plants and the plant decomposes. But most of the steps of the nitrogen cycle are dependent on microbes. And the nitrogen cycle would not happen, almost all of the steps of the nitrogen cycle would not happen if there were not microbes, showing you how important microbes are in the nitrogen cycle and for the world, because obviously we need the nitrogen cycle. Otherwise, the nitrogen would always stay in one place in the ecosystem. It wouldn't be very useful to us. Microbes are also important in the making of soil. Most people think that biogeochemistry has no concept of life. That isn't true. There are rock-eating microbes, and they make a significant portion of the soil. They do not make the majority of the soil, don't get me wrong, the majority of rocks are converted into soil by erosion from wind and water, but microbes do make a significant portion of the soil. And it's just because certain microbes leach nutrients out of rocks and then break down the rocks, giving rise to soil. Any question about that? If we look at the atmosphere levels in the Earth's history, we find that at the very beginning of the Earth's history, for at least 1.8 million years, there was essentially no oxygen in the Earth's atmosphere. And then at 1.8 to 2.7 billion years ago, oxygen started building up in the Earth's atmosphere. And then once it built up, it just increased until we get the present day oxygen about 21%. And most people say, well, that's because of green plants. No, it is not because of green plants. At the very beginning, 1.8 to 2.7 billion years ago, the oxygen came into the Earth's atmosphere from zero from microorganisms, particularly the cyanobacteria released oxygen, which went into the atmosphere. And these are actually photosynthetic organisms releasing the oxygen. And then they got the oxygen to a high enough level that green plants could evolve. And then once green plants evolved, they also started putting out oxygen. But even today, with the oxygen being at 21%, half of that oxygen is from microorganisms, and the other half is from green plants. So even today, microbes are extremely important for the level of oxygen in the Earth's atmosphere. And at the start, they were the only thing putting oxygen into the Earth's atmosphere. Any question about that? When we look at a sewage treatment plant, humans are responsible for generating the waste, right? That's what happens when you flush your toilet and wash stuff down your sinks. And humans are responsible for breaking down the waste, right? That's what this sewage treatment plant is for, breaking down the waste, right? Anyone object? Nobody's objecting? Humans do not break down any of this waste. We only make the facility for breaking down the waste, but it's actually microorganisms which are breaking down what you flush down your toilets and what you flush down your sinks. And then the microorganisms convert that organic waste into CO2 and water. And so the microorganisms break down the waste. Humans only responsible for generating the waste. So the microorganisms are extremely important. Otherwise, we'd be have a planet full of sewage. Let's talk a little bit about microorganisms. When we use that term, we can use it synonymously with microbe. So a microbe means a microorganism, and this is an organism that is too small to be seen with the unaided eye. They are single-celled organisms. They can come in many shapes and sizes. They include bacteria, archaebacteria, also called archaea, the yeast, some molds, all the protozoans, some algae, and I'll talk about the algae. If they're single-celled algae, they're a microorganism. If they're a multi-celled algae, and they're very big so that you can see it, like the algae that washes up on the Washington and the Oregon coast, like the kelp, then that's not a microorganism, but it is algae. The algae that I'm talking about are the ones that are small, and you have to have a microscope to see them. Most of them are single-celled, but there are some that are colonial and they're just small numbers of cells, but they can be colonial. And then two special microorganisms, which you might not call them organisms, viruses and prions, and they're special because they are not cellular. We call them acellular. They don't have cells. You could even argue that they're not an organism, that they're a virus or a prion. And I'm not going to go into what the heck an organism is. But they're not cells, and that's how we'll separate viruses and prions from the other microbes. But you do need a microscope to see viruses and prions, and so that's why they're called microbes. And viruses and prions can cause diseases, and that's another reason why we call them microbes. Microorganisms are almost everywhere, and because of that, we say that they are ubiquitous, that there is the ubiquity of microorganisms. You can find them almost everywhere. They play beneficial roles in numerous processes. Like I mentioned, that they are important in the nitrogen cycle. Nitrogen would not move from one part in the ecosystem to another part without the microbes. We use them in breaking down our waste. And we use them in many other places too, like they help you digest your food, and we'll talk a little bit about that. Microorganisms are numerically the most abundant life form on Earth, and so they are very important to us and to the world. All right, I briefly discussed the term cell. Let's talk about what is a cell. The cell is the basic structural and functional unit of all living organisms, and you'll note that I'm calling a virus and a prion not a living organism because they do not have cells. And I don't want to go into whether they're alive or not because people argue about that, and I'm not going to get into that argument. But they do not have cells, and here we're talking about cells. And cells are highly organized compartment. They are bounded by a thin, flexible structure called the plasma membrane, which actually that's not the plasma membrane you're seeing there. That's a cell wall, but underneath that, that's the plasma membrane. And the cell has three basic components. All cells have these three basic components. One is the plasma membrane. The second is the cytoplasm, the liquid portion in the cytosol, cytoplasm, every place in the cell outside the nucleus. And all living things have DNA as well. Those are the three components that all cells have. Any question about that? All right. So here we have some pictures here. Where in this picture can you find microorganisms? Do you find it in the water, on the plants, on the rock? Do you find microbes everywhere in every inch of this picture? It's a yes or no, people.
Yes.
Yes, you do. You find it in every inch of the water, every inch of the rock, and every inch of the plants. All right, how about the ocean water? Do you find it in every inch of ocean water?
Yes.
Yes.
I heard a yes. How about in the air? The air above the ocean water. Do we find it in every inch of air above the ocean water? It's a yes or a no.
I would
Nope.
say yes, and I
Yes.
think
Yes, you
everything-
do. You actually find microorganisms in every inch up to a mile up above the surface of the land or the water. The microorganisms, especially spores, can be blown, and you will find them up as high as a mile into the atmosphere. Okay, how about into the soil? Do you find it in every inch of the soil?
Yes.
Yes, you do. You have to go down a mile into the Earth's crust or underneath the Earth's bottom of the ocean floor. You have to go under a mile before you don't find living organisms in every inch. And how about on the cat and the person? You have tons of microorganisms on the cat and the person. How about in the desert? Do you find microorganisms in every inch of the sand of the Sahara Desert?
Yes.
Yes, you do. All right, and how about in this picture? Let me mention that this is a magma right there, and this is a volcanic vent, and there's rock there. You find microorganisms in every inch of this picture.
Why not we go for a full slate and just say yes?
Nope, you don't find it with the magma. That's too hot. If any microorganism goes there, it'd be killed by the heat of the magma. But every place else, the rock around the magma, you'll have microorganisms. Okay? So that is why microorganisms are almost ubiquitous on the planet. You find them almost everywhere. The exception would be magma coming out of the Earth's crust, and only where it's really hot, like right here on the side edge there, you probably have microorganisms that tolerate the temperature there, depending on how hot it is. I'm trying to remember. I think microorganisms can survive 123 degrees Celsius. So 100 degrees Celsius is boiling water. All right, where do we find microorganisms? Essentially everywhere. In environments where on land there's water, in the atmosphere, subsurface on both the land and the ocean, you can find microorganisms down a mile underneath the surface of either the ocean or the land, as well as a mile up into the air. And you find it in all plants and animals. You find microorganisms essentially wherever liquid water is present, and the temperature is between a minus 20 degrees Celsius and 120. I've got 120 degrees Celsius here. I think it's 123 is the highest. And this is the temperature Fahrenheit. Now below this temperature, you can find microorganisms, but they won't be metabolically active because they'll be frozen. Okay? So there could be microorganisms which are frozen, and they have to be thawed out before they can be metabolically active. Microbes are numerically the most abundant life forms on the planet. How many microorganisms are there? We're talking about prokaryotes. I mean, we're not talking about viruses, because if we included viruses, you'd probably find 10 times the number that I'm going to give you. But if we're talking about prokaryotic cells only, in 1 gram of soil, we have about 1 times 10 to the 8th prokaryotic cells. Okay? 1 times 10 to the 8th. What is that? 100 million cells in 1 gram of soil. 1 gram of soil would be something like a little bit like that. Okay? Do we have fewer or more microorganisms in 1 milliliter of ocean water? And 1 milliliter of ocean water is 1 gram of ocean water. Do we have more or less than 10 to the 8th?
I'd say more.
Actually, ocean water is a desert. There's fewer microbes in ocean water than any place on the planet, with the exception of being in the Sahara Desert, because that would be also a desert, something like that. or if you start going very high up in the atmosphere or low in the atmosphere, or not low in the atmosphere, sorry, low in the underground. But soil has about 1 times 10 to the 8th, depending on the moisture and the organic matter. If you have lots of organic matter and lots of moisture, you'll have more than this. And then if we're talking about like soil in the Sahara Desert, which would be sand, you'll have less than that. And that's because there's not very much water around, as well as not much organic material around, and so you'll have fewer microorganisms. And the ocean water is like the desert, and so there's actually less. How about in 1 gram of human feces? Do you have more or less than 1 times 10 to the 8th? Come on, let's get a guess.
More?
Yeah, you've got more. On 1 human being, do you have more or less than 1 times 10 to the 8th cells?
More?
More is correct. And the entire Earth, of course, you have more. So here's the number. Ocean water, you got about 1 times 10 to the 6th cells in 1 milliliter or 1 gram of ocean water. In the soil, you've got 1 times 10 to the 8th. On 1 gram of human feces, if it's fresh feces, something that just came right out of the body, you've got up to 1 times 10 to the 11th microorganisms. But then again, if you find the feces all dried out on the Sahara Desert, for example, and it's been there for a long time, so it's all dried out, you'll only have 1 times 10 to the 6th microorganisms. But generally, the feces coming out of the body will be closer to 10 to the 11th. And actually the feces, 55% of the wet weight of your feces is due to microorganisms, meaning the majority of your fecal matter is microorganisms. A human has 3.8 times 10 to the 13th microorganisms living on or in them. So on your skin, in your nasal cavity, your mouth, and your urinary cavities as well. And of course, the gastrointestinal cavity is totally covered with microorganisms. In the entire planet, the human population, it's actually getting closer to 8 billion people, but it's over 7 billion people. It's getting close to 8 billion people. For the total population of microorganisms, it's 1 times 10 to the 30th microorganisms on the planet. And if you want to know the name for that, it's a nonillion. All right, any question about that? The important part is there's astounding numbers of prokaryotic cells in, well, actually every location on the planet except for magma, and just astounding numbers. I'll word it that way.
I had a question for you.
Yeah.
Do we have access to this PowerPoint through our Canvas?
You will be after when I'm finished with the lesson, but I won't put it up until I finished with the lesson. You do have something similar. The study guide covers the same material I'm going over, but this is in a different format. It's only text, the study guide.
Okay.
It doesn't have the pictures or the PowerPoint.
So will we always have access to the PowerPoint after a lecture?
Yes, after I'm done with lesson 1, I will put up the PowerPoint as a PDF, and see how that's unpublished? I will publish that. And if you ever see it, if we're done with the lesson, you can request it and I will publish that. and I should do it when we're done with chapter 1 and chapter 10. I should do it, but if for some reason I don't, I'll just send me a reminder and I'll publish it.
Okay.
So if nobody sends me a reminder and I forget, it may be a while before I get it published, but I will put it up when we're done with the lesson. Microorganisms can cause disease, so they do have a relationship with disease. Any microbe that can cause disease is called a pathogenic microbe. So pathogenic microbe is a microbe that can cause disease. Most microorganisms do not cause disease. Only a small percentage of all microbes are pathogenic or disease-causing. So most microbes that you run into do not cause human disease, is what we're talking about, human disease. When we're talking about disease, it's important to separate diseases into two types. The infectious disease, which spread from one person to another, and an inherited disease, which the person was born with. And inherited diseases do not spread from one patient to another. Infectious diseases are caused by microbes, and that's why they're infectious. Can anyone give me an example of an infectious disease? What's an infectious disease? Just name one. Come on, people, we're in an epidemic.
Chlamydia.
Say again? Chlamydia. Yeah, that's an
Chlamydia.
infectious disease. What's the infectious disease that's currently a world pandemic?
COVID-19.
COVID-19, another infectious disease. Okay, can anyone name an inherited disease caused by a person's genes? Think about
Would that have anything to do with autoimmune disorders?
it could. Not all autoimmune diseases are inherited.
Down syndrome.
Down syndrome is definitely an inherited disease. Autoimmune diseases tend to run in families, so it's a little more complex. But there might be some autoimmune diseases which are inherited. I don't know. Certainly not all autoimmune diseases are inherited. So that one's a little more tricky. Let me go ahead with another example because we're about to run out of time here. And that is Tay-Sachs disease, an inherited disease. Sickle cell anemia, also an inherited disease. All right, any questions about this slide? Come on, there we go. If not, I'm going to end the lesson here. We have only 2 minutes of class left, and I will see you at 6:30 in the lab. Any questions? If not, I'll see you in the lab.
Thank you.
All right.
You.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you.